everyone. We are delighted to see you for our first meeting of the year. We hope there will be many more. Unfortunately, we are beginning at a very sad set of developments, and we will all be discussing this, especially, of course, the fantastic group who will be talking about this. I'd like to take a moment to thank our UCLA co-sponsors, International Institute, Luskin Department of Public Policy, and the Yunus and Saraya Nazarian Center. Now, before we begin, I have the unfortunate need to give you a lot of important information so that all of this can run smoothly. One, while you can see us, we cannot see or hear you. Two, we are recording the presentation today, and the video will be available on the CMED website, YouTube, and our Facebook page as soon as possible. May take a day or two, hopefully less. If you are joining us using Zoom, please notice that the chat window at the bottom of the screen. Notice that. We will share announcements during the talk with you here. However, you will not be able to add comments in the chat box. If you have questions for our speakers, please type them in the Q&A window, also in the bottom of your screen and one of the tops of the meeting. Be sure to include your name and your country and or affiliation. We need that to welcome to the group. Be sure to include your name and note that your name, country, and or affiliation will be announced aloud along with your question. Only the CMED team will be able to see your questions. In some cases, we will answer questions in writing in the Q&A window for others to see. Please keep questions concise so we can answer as many questions as possible. Concise. If you are joining us on the YouTube platform, please note you will not be able to ask a question because comments will be disabled. Our panel today is phenomenal, and we'll be led by Farah Padur, who is a senior advisor at the United States Institute of Peace and a board member at the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, where she is responsible for advising the U.S. Agency for International Development on the strategic direction of the Partnership for Peace Fund. And so I now turn over the rest of the program to Farah. I'll see you at the end. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the profound loss and suffering that many have endured since October 7th. While our discussion today will not directly focus on that pain, it is crucial to acknowledge that the human toll has been central in shaping this webinar. Having said that, our discussion today will focus on the impact of October 7th on the Israeli and Palestinian politics, as well as the broader regional dynamics. At the heart of this discussion will be the elusive peace process. We are aware that this conversation going to be difficult, given the fact that the full ramifications of October 7th is still unfolding. Yet we really need to ask the following questions: whether October 7th was a transformative event or not. Has it really fundamentally changed the domestic and regional dynamics? And if yes, in what way? Are we going to witness the emergence of a new Middle East, or the exact opposite, that October 7th was not transformative? As painful as it was, and it is, It merely exposed the limitations of the Israeli and Palestinian national projects. It only exposed the limitation of this region, a region that is traumatized and chronically traumatized and maybe unable move towards stability and peace. To answer these questions and many more, I'm pleased and honored to have our esteemed speakers, whom I'm going to introduce in a moment. Their intellectual generosity, experience, and insight will lead us through this complex landscape. And I have to say that I'm personally grateful for their contribution to this discussion today. And before we move on, maybe a bit of housekeeping. I know that Steve touched up on that, but each of our speakers will have roughly 7 minutes to present their thoughts. After that, we are going to open the floor for your questions. And please, as Steve said, please state your name, country, affiliation, and kindly note that CMED is committed to create safe and inclusive spaces where all perspectives are respected. So we are all invited to be mindful of that. With that, I'm going to move to Mkhaymar Abu Saada. Mkhaymar is an associate professor of political science and former chairman of the department at Al-Azhar University in Gaza. He has published many academic papers and books in internationally recognized journals and received his PhD from the University of Missouri. Thank you, Mkhaymar, for joining us. And maybe you could kick off this conversation by telling us how October 7th influenced or altered the trajectory and aspiration of the Palestinian National Project. Please, Mkhaymar, the floor.
Thank you, Farah. Let me, first of all, thank Steven Spiegel, the director of CMED, for hosting this webinar. And I want to thank you also, Farah, and my co-partners in this webinar, Mickey and John. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And in spite of the tragic situation that is happening in the Middle East, which you have acknowledged, Farah, I think it's good that we need to talk about the impact of the events that happened over the past year on Palestine, Israel, and the region. From a Palestinian perspective, let me just begin by saying that the Palestinians have been suffering for the past 76 years, since the establishment of Israel in 1948. The Palestinians have become, most of them have become refugees. They were deprived of their political rights and their national aspirations. And for the past 76 years, the Palestinians have been trying with different ways, different tools to try to regain their political and national aspirations. But unfortunately, that hasn't succeeded and hasn't been fruitful to the point of ending the Israeli occupation that started in 1967 when Israel occupied the Palestinian territories, which spanned Gaza and East Jerusalem, in addition to other Arab territories in Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. For the past, let's say, for the past 56 or 57 years, the Palestinians have been trying to put an end to the Israeli occupation of their land and to try to establish a Palestinian independent state. But again, these efforts, which were started by the PLO back in the mid-1960s, and other Palestinian groups that joined the fight against Israel, like Hamas and PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but that didn't put an end to the Israeli occupation and the Israeli settlement enterprise in the Palestinian occupied territories. Now, moving into the subject, what the impact of October 7 on the Palestinian National Project and the Palestinian political aspirations. I think I need to focus here on two issues. Again, in spite of the tragic and the bloodshed that has taken place over the past year, I don't want to remind our viewers and the panelists here that the Palestinian people have paid a very heavy price in the Gaza Strip. More than 41,000 people have been killed. Roughly 95,000 people have been injured. I think also roughly we're talking about 10,000 people are missing. In addition to hundreds and thousands have been also imprisoned by Israel, not to mention the destruction that has been inflicted on the Gaza Strip over the past year, which according to many international organizations, they very much say that 75% of Gaza households have been completely or partially destroyed. And we need very much billions of dollars to rebuild Gaza as it was before October 7th. Anyway, in spite of this catastrophic situation that impacted the Palestinian people, not to mention also that the West Bank, the Palestinians in the West Bank did not escape the Israeli annihilation. Roughly 700 Palestinians have also been killed in the West Bank. Israel, for the first time, used fighter jets to bomb Palestinian resistance groups in Tulkarem just a few days ago. And thousands of Palestinians have been rounded and also imprisoned in the West Bank. Again, these tragic and catastrophic situation that have impacted the Palestinian people in a very bad way. But let's say that from a political perspective, I think two things have happened since October 7. Let me say that the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been very much neglected by the international community, by Israel. And if you all remember that over the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years, the region was very much preoccupied with the so-called normalization between Israel and the Arab countries, which started in 2020 between Israel and United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, later on a later stage with Morocco and to some extent with Sudan. So the Palestinian issue was unfortunately forgotten, or as they say in English, it was on the back burner of regional and international governments. Basically, Netanyahu in his repeated speeches at the UN General Assembly, very much has been promoting Israeli-Arab normalization on the expense of the Palestinian issue, and that the Palestinian issue can be weighted, that there wasn't, before October 7, there wasn't a need to solve the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And let me just say that between 2019 and 2022, 5 Israeli parliamentary elections were held in Israel for their own causes. And unfortunately, Palestine was not even an issue on the top 10 Israeli issues in the Israeli parliamentary or Knesset elections between 2019 and 2022. And the Palestinian people, the Palestinian factions have been watching, have been seeing what's happening, that their cause have been forgotten, that their cause have been very much ignored and neglected. And then October 7 comes, and Palestine and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is again on center stage of the region and the international community after it was forgotten again for many years. The other issue here, let me say that the impact of the October 7 on the Palestinian issue, that as a result of Palestine becoming center stage regionally and internationally, 5 more countries recognize Palestine in addition to the 138 countries that recognized Palestine back in 2012. These 5 countries were Spain, Norway, Slovenia, Armenia, and Palestine has gained momentum. Let me also say that one other important thing that came out of October 7, that the two-state solution became back on the table. Let's say that as a result of the Palestinian division or the political divide that took place between Hamas and Fatah. Fatah is ruling the PA in the West Bank. Hamas was ruling or has been ruling the Gaza Strip since the summer of 2007. And as a result of this Palestinian political divide, the two-state solution was very much on the sidelines. And let me just remind our viewers here that Netanyahu at one point said that the Palestinian political divide is a strategic interest for Israel. And let me also remind all of you that it was Netanyahu who helped Hamas stay in power in the Gaza Strip for the past 17 years by allowing Qatari cash to flow into the Gaza Strip and to keep Hamas a powerful organization. The two-state solution was very much in a deadlock. But now, after October 7, if you can just allow me, Farah, just one more minute and I will be finished with this. That the two-state solution is back on the table. The U.S. Administration has been promoting the two-state solution again and again by President Joe Biden, by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and many other international leaders. And let me also just add one more point here, that just to summarize my argument here is that one lesson to be learned from October 7 is that
we're going to talk about the lessons later. Khaymer, thank you so much for your opening remarks. You mentioned so many actually good points, and one of the things that you mentioned, that some good things that came out of October 7th, if we can use this term, that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is no longer a lip service, but more of a policy direction, maybe for the US, but definitely for the Gulf countries who have put brakes on the normalization process. There is no question that the UAE right now, froze the communication with Israel and maintain the relations with Israel on a security to security level. I'm going to go back to you and maybe ask you, a lot of question about how I'm wondering how long will it take for the world to reach a Gaza fatigue, or until this commitment for the two-state solution evaporates again. I'm going to go back to you. Another thing that you mentioned, which is, I thought, very important, that the Palestinian issue was not on the top issues on the voting topics for the Israeli people. And this is something also to reflect about. And lastly, that the ripple effect of October 7th is one of it is the recognition of the Palestinian state by a number of states around the world. With that, let me go to Mickey. Mickey Aaronson. Mickey Rosen Aaronson. I'm going to go to Mickey right now. Mickey, she serves as an independent international relations strategist and a board member of several NGOs. Formerly, she worked as a chief of staff and a foreign policy advisor to the Minister of Transport in Israel. She's a senior director for foreign policy in the National Security Council in the Prime Minister Office, and a senior researcher in the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Mickey, it's always a pleasure to have you. And maybe you could tell us how October 7th influenced the Israeli security doctrine and the country's approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Please, Mickey.
Thank you, Farah. My camera keeps on jumping here. I hope you can see me well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, and to all the participants. I think this is extremely important because as complicated as the situation is, if we stop talking to each other, it will get far more complicated. So I would like to mention about 5 points. 4 will show the change in the area, and 1 will show that nothing changed in the area. So what has changed? First and foremost, I think, in a way, we lost hope. For years, we used to believe that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is about territory. If we give a bit more, 80%, 90%, 95%, 98%, we could solve it. If we could solve this conflict once and for all. If it's an issue of territory, we could reach the Oslo Agreement, we could leave Gaza, we could leave Lebanon, and then things would be solved. There would always be crazy people, but we could reach agreements. Now we realize this is not the case. October 7th was really the worst awakening we had. We understand now that the only way to really solve the problem is if Israel disappears from the map. And if it's not just about us, if radical movements, religious movements would actually be existent with all their theories and all their doctrines in Israel's territory, in the region, and all over the world, actually. The attack was not, October 7th was not meant to end an occupation. October 7th was about humiliating, it was about killing. It did not aim to release any prisoners from Israel, to release any territory from Israel. It was not just about killing Israeli soldiers. It was directed very clearly at a civilian population, men, women, children, of course, and it's heartbreaking because our hope for a solution that will be based on territory is gone. Second point that demonstrates change is when you study threat, you actually take into account intentions and capabilities. We ignored in Israel, we ignored the capabilities of Hamas in Gaza. We ignored the tunnels, we ignored the missiles and all the other weapons because we honestly believed that Hamas is A, deterred, and B, because it's a governing organ that has responsibility to its population, as opposed to, by the way, we assumed Islamic Jihad, it will work to raise the level, to improve the life of people in Gaza, because it is responsible for the life of people in Gaza. And if they get more money, if they get more jobs, if at some point there's a chance of prosperity, then we will not be attacked. But we were wrong, because since 2005, we left Gaza. Gaza was not under siege because the border to Egypt was open all the time. A lot of instruments, construction instruments, were brought and smuggled into Gaza, but all of them, 100%, were used to create tunnels and acquire more weapons. There were no factories, no agricultural aspirations. All was used to create weapons and tunnels. Now, the implementation of this lesson after October 7th is in the north, because we relate to Hezbollah's capabilities and not to its intentions anymore. And therefore, we would like to weaken Hezbollah because we believe it could repeat Hamas's actions. By the way, just today, it was published that a tunnel was found from the Lebanese territory into Israel. Point number 3 of a change in the Israeli perception. We used to be willing to pay any price, anything, for our kidnapped soldiers. Today, we believe still that morally it is true. It is actually, according to Judaism, the sanctity of life says that you have to return your hostages. But now we also realize that the price is almost unbearable. The Shalit deal a few years ago, for one soldier, we released more than 1,000 terrorists. The most prominent one is, of course, Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar, who promised after October 7 to repeat October 7. And he was re-elected after Ania was killed. He was re-elected as the head of Hamas, and he has really very good training for the job because he knows how to do October 7. So it was proven that many of the people that are released in these deals return to terror. Everybody wants to release. Most of the people in Israel are desperate to release our hostages, but we understand that the price is terrible. And some people today are not willing to pay it in Israel. Point number 4 about the change. I'll now zoom out a little bit. The world has changed and the region has changed. We see an excess of Iran and its proxies, but not only. We see Russia joining them, we see North Korea, partially China. Now, following Israel's actions to weaken Iran and its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and so on, there is a historical opportunity now for the entire region to reshape it. Lebanon can regain control of the country. The Lebanese policy can be dictated by Lebanese interests and not by Iranian interests. Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, the Yemenite government could maybe face in a better way the Houthi terror organization. So in this respect, there is a possibility, I don't know if it will take place, but to reshape at least the entire region in a good way. What hasn't changed? What hasn't changed is it's not really mainly about Israel. This whole conflict which Iran is pushing, its proxies, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq, and Hezbollah, Hamas, this is also a lot, and we don't mention it often enough, Shia against Sunni. It's not about us. It's the liberal world also against radicals. It's about domination in the Middle East. Who will dominate which parts in the Middle East? Again, I mentioned Shia and Sunni. This was true before October 7th, and this is true after October 7th, and we shouldn't forget it. I will stop at this point. I think we should leave time for questions.
Thank you, Mickey. You alluded to a number of really important points, but maybe one of the points that I want to go back and circle back to you is how Israel read Hamas in a wrong way and thought it was deterred. But again, there were a lot of security warnings that was shared with the Prime Minister office, which was ignored. Maybe we can talk about that later. With that, I'm going to move to Jean Bell. Jean Bell is the director of the Conciliators Guild, an organization dedicated to excellence in diplomacy. Previously, he served as the director of the Middle East and Mediterranean program at the Toledo International Center for Peace. He has worked for over 30 years on the Middle East politics. He served as a diplomat and political advisor to the personal representative of the UN Secretary General for Southern Lebanon. Mr. Bell is also a founding member of the Jerusalem Old City Initiative. Jean, pleasure to have you. If you could give us the regional aspect and how October 7th influenced the broader dynamics of the Middle East, and if in any way this event have changed the alliances and the relationship between the regional countries. John, please.
Thank you, Farah, and thank you for this panel, to Mkhayyar and to Mickey. I will take a big picture view here and incorporate some of what you've heard into kind of a more regional picture. The first thing I'd like to do is to cover a bit where we've been over this last very quite painful and terrible year, and I'd like to point out three contradictions that we have to sort of assert in order to move forward, as well as one big failure. The three contradictions are: the first is that Israel has really kind of lost the battle of narratives in the globe, number one. And very much in the region. I think it almost can't be underestimated to what degree Israel has unfortunately sown resentment among so many people in the Middle East and across the globe because of what's happened. At the same time, Israel has demonstrated a considerable military prowess, especially in the last few months, and its ability to fulfill its military mission, I think, has made a lot of people look up and wonder about what's going to happen next. The second is something Khaymer, we all know, and Khaymer mentioned, which is that the Palestinian issue is back on the map. It wasn't before, and now it's back on. But at the same time, the contradiction is, it seems to me at least, that we're still very, very far away from having a Palestinian state. So this, again, this dichotomy has to be noted. The third one is about the axis of resistance. The axis of resistance demonstrated gains and losses. Gains in the sense that Israel had quite a difficult time dealing with Hamas, and there were a lot of questions about Israeli capacity at that point against the axis of resistance. And at the same time, the exact opposite has happened with Hezbollah, ironically, which was always considered the mightier force. And Israel's successes against Hezbollah have put a lot of questions about the axis of resistance. And I'd like to come back about the axis of resistance quite shortly and what the implications are for the future. The final point I'd like to make in where we've been is more as a diplomat and a mediator, which is the outright failure of diplomacy. The diplomacy over the last year has been highly tactical. It hasn't been strategic, and it's failed. Now, we're probably going to spend decades analyzing why, but at this stage, I just want to note that before we move forward. So where are we going? Having looked at this terrible year that has transpired in the Middle East, where is it all going? The first statement I'll make is that I think at this stage of things, we are on a straight line, if I may be slightly dramatic, sometime next year would be my guess, towards the possibility of a direct war between Iran and Israel. This is something that, in my view, has to be prevented at all costs. The implications aren't just for the Middle East. If there are attacks on Iranian petroleum facilities, on Iranian nuclear facilities, these have implications for the global economy. And above all, they have implications for the relationships between the great powers, the United States, China, and Russia, which are already deeply fraught and full of tension. So this possibility, and I think it's more than a possibility, and the reason I say that is because Israel has very powerful military capacities. It's had military success and intelligence success. It may be emboldened. It does feel a sense of existential threat, as Mickey has just explained to us. And it has a prime minister who has a terrifying capacity to create facts on the ground and therefore create the conditions where the United States will have a very hard time, possibly in the future, avoiding supporting Israel in a situation against Iran. So that's number one. It's dramatic, it's frightening, but I think it's absolutely necessary that we point it out. I don't think it's this year, although it could happen in a week. I think it's next year and possibly late next year, and it will depend on the results of the American elections. I'll come back to that. The second issue to look at about where we're going is the axis of resistance. I think there are some large questions about it. The fact is that the Hamas action of October 7th has led to the destruction of Gaza. Number two, Hezbollah's balance of power with Israel has not worked. It's not deterred Israel from attacking Lebanon and attacking Hezbollah directly and with great power. And number three, and possibly most importantly, Iran has already been hit by Israel, and we're likely to see much more in the immediate term as well as in the longer term. Therefore, in my view, there are large questions about the efficacy of the whole axis of resistance. One can argue that its purpose is towards a long-term war of attrition against Israel. That's possible. But let me just pose a question. I really do wonder whether Iran, the Islamic Republic, doesn't also question at this stage whether the axis of resistance as designed and as we've seen it act out is the best way for Iran to safeguard its own security. I think there are big questions around that, not answers at this stage. The third point going forward that I'd like to point to is something that Mickey mentioned right at the end of her presentation. And it's this idea of there being two Middle Easts. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu said it in a kind of biblical manner at the UN, but the idea has been there before. There's one much more ideological Middle East, a northern front, if you wish, and a southern one that until October 7th was more economically and technologically oriented, more linked to globalized trends, etc. There is a truth to that, but I think there's another truth that's hidden for the moment that may come out in the future. And that's why I'm pointing it out, since it's about where we're going. First of all, it's important to note that for Israel to belong to one part of that Middle East, it has to pay a price, and that is the two-state solution. I don't think that's going away. Yes, I think it is in the minds of Benjamin Netanyahu and many others that once this war is over and things settle down, then the normalization process will just kick back in. My own view is that from here forward, people may have woken up to the reality that you need a Palestinian state to stabilize things. So things may not be that easy, but the larger point I wanted to make is that this two kinds of Middle East, these two Middle Easts, are not just between borders and between a northern Middle East and a southern Middle East, if you wish. They're actually within the countries. In Lebanon, in Israel, I would even dare say in Iran, the populations are not all of one variety. And I foresee, not in the immediate term again, but in the slightly medium term, internal strife in all these countries is going to return and complicate our effort further. But I will end on the following, which is, well, what are we going to do about all this? Because I'm a practitioner, I always tend to go towards the pragmatic at the end. We do need a kind of container and frame that holds no matter what happens in the future in terms of the internal. The first point I'll make is about preventing a war between Iran and Israel. The sine qua non for that is American action and intervention. There are very big questions about the efficacy of that. Yes, it'll depend on which administration we all get post November 5th elections. We don't know what the foreign policy of Kamala Harris is going to be if she wins. If it's anything like Joe Biden's and its continued tactical diplomacy, I think that spells big trouble. Trump is a paradox because he himself, I believe, wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He's a deal maker. I don't think he's a warmonger himself, but he's surrounded by hawks. So we have this completely contradictory administration. Which way will it shake out? I don't know. What really I'm saying here is we can't bet on the American administration to solve this problem alone. And therefore, I'll point to factor number two, which I think can still play a role. It hasn't yet, which is the key to both Iran and Israel in the region is Saudi Arabia. It's the Saudi Arabians who have influence and who both the Iranians and the Israelis need for different reasons, who can work with the United States, for example, in order to mitigate the possibilities of such a war next year. The third possibility to deal with that, and this is my own view, is I don't think it's impossible, if properly constructed, to create a multilateral forum for regional security at the official level, not track two, which involves both these actors. I know it sounds like a stretch right now, and I'd be happy to discuss it further in questions and answers. I don't think this is impossible anymore, to have them both in a multilateral format. Number two, what to do? we absolutely need high-quality arrangements in Gaza as well as in southern Lebanon or in the whole Lebanon-Israel front. The wars have to be contained through very specific measures. And I used the words high quality because I think they have to be high quality. And what I mean by that, number one, is there has to be as little presence of Israel in both as possible. For example, the Israeli presence in Lebanon empowers Hezbollah as much as it may meet some of Israel's very security needs. And in that sense, you're feeding the fire again. So the formulas are out there for both Gaza and for southern Lebanon and Lebanon, Israel. The higher quality ones we can discuss. Number three, I have to say it, I agree with Mchaima. We have to go back to the two-state solution as distant as it seems today. The Saudis and others, and the European Union and others, are pushing forward an international coalition for a two-state solution now. I hope it keeps going. My last remark, though, is at the end of the day, we go back to one thing. In a way, it's back to Mickey and comments from her. In the end, this isn't a decision that Israelis have to make. Israelis have to decide how they want to be in the region. How can they be in the region? What is the format that they will be in the region? In my view, that without a Palestinian state beside Israel, it's a very problematic situation. And therefore, it will be up to Israelis. And I think only Israelis can do this between each other to decide what is going to be the nature of Israel's relations with the rest of the region. For that, I still think, even though it's a bit of a mantra, that there's no way around having a Palestinian state. Thank you, Farah.
Thank you, John. There are 2 points that really stood for me from your presentation, that Israel strategy to create a new security reality for the state of Israel has been to dismantle these united fronts by gradually addressing one front at a time. And by doing that, we have seen that it degraded the military capabilities of Hamas in Gaza. It really decapitated the moral and military commands of Hezbollah. And it seems that this strategy is working, that Israel is actually can contain this octopus hand and the circle of fire. And that poses the question about what you mentioned about Iran's strategy and the efficacy of this strategy of protecting its national interests, which we know is the nuclear program, and what to do later. And there is a very interesting point that you are making, that we might witness the re-emergence of a case for multilateralism in terms of dealing with the many issues that we have in the region. I'm gonna go back to you, Mkhaimar, and talk about the Palestinian issue, because you mentioned that it was put back on the table. There is a big chance that it's going to be a policy direction for regional states, and definitely the United States. Tomorrow, the Palestinian factions are going to meet in Cairo. What do you think the Palestinians should do in order to keep the Palestinian issue on the table, especially with everything that's going on in the region, and the situation in Lebanon is being extremely, dire? What do you think the Palestinians should do? What the plan that they should propose?
Thank you, Farah. Now, I agree with John, first of all, that yes, October 7 doesn't mean that there will be a Palestinian state tomorrow, or the two-state solution will be anytime happening soon. But let me say that at least October 7th has pushed that the two-state solution should be the only solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because other solutions are not workable. Now, what the Palestinians can do to advance their cause, I know that there has to be a resolution of the Palestinian internal divide. division between Hamas and Fatah that has lasted for the past 17 years. And I know that there has been a number of initiatives by the Palestinians, by the Arab countries, mainly Egypt, to some extent other countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and also at the international level, lately China, and before China, Russia, have all of these countries have tried to put an end to the Palestinian internal divide and restore Palestinian reconciliation. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, or that hasn't succeeded so far. Not because, there is part of the problem has to do with the Palestinian factions between Hamas and Fatah, because here we are talking about two different factions with two different ideologies. Fatah is a nationalist Palestinian group that is dedicated to the two-state solution through peace negotiations with Israel. Hamas is an Islamist ideological group that is dedicated to the creation of a Palestinian state on all over Palestine, even that they have changed their charter in 2017 and they accepted the notion of a Palestinian state under 1967. So one thing is that these two Palestinian groups are ideologically different. Second, over the past 17 years, so many facts on the ground have been created, which makes it very much impossible to go back to pre-2007. But let's also not forget that there is an Israeli veto on Palestinian reconciliation. There is an American veto on Palestinian reconciliation. Let's not forget that Hamas, even before October 7, was classified as a terrorist organization by the US, much of EU, European Union, and Israel. And therefore, it wasn't easy for Fatah and President Mahmoud Abbas to make reconciliation with an organization, which is Hamas, which has been classified as a terrorist organization. The minute that President Abbas would make reconciliation with Hamas, he would be accused by embracing and sponsoring a terrorist organization, and he might even face the fate that Yasser Arafat faced back in 2004. And that's why the Palestinian reconciliation hasn't succeeded. Now, maybe one thing that can come out of what's happening now is that Hamas moderates its views toward the US, toward Israel, toward the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But this is just a wishful thinking. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think what is being debated, and I know that there will be a meeting sometime soon this week in Cairo between Hamas and Fatah. I think the only probably workable solution now is that Hamas stays on the sideline. Hamas give up its control of the Gaza Strip, and that there has to be a formation of a Palestinian new government, a government, we call it a national consensus government, that is made of technocrats, is made of professionals who are capable of rebuilding, reconstructing Gaza, and put Palestine on the right track in spite of the political divide that has taken place. Again, but that also needs support of Israel. That also needs support of the US. We cannot the Palestinians cannot basically decide on their own. Again, Netanyahu has been repeating since October 7 that in Gaza there will be no Hamas and no Abbas, meaning that neither Hamas nor the PA will be allowed to rule in the Gaza Strip. And he has been trying, unfortunately, to look into some other ways, trying to, for example, to allow Gaza clans and Gaza families to rule the Gaza Strip. But Netanyahu acknowledged that has failed, and this is not going anywhere. So the only thing I think is to allow the Palestinian Authority to go back into the Gaza Strip, to form a government, and on the vision that President Biden laid out back in November 2023, a vitalized Palestinian Authority, a Palestinian Authority that is democratic, transparent, responsible to its people. That is, I think, the only solution to go forward away from Palestinian internal division and to try to get international support for rebuilding and reconstructing the Gaza Strip.
Thank you, Muhammad. I want to go back to Mickey about her comments about how Israel misread Hamas and thought it was deterred. And of course, after October 7th, Israel's sense of security has been shattered. I remember in July, the Knesset voted for a resolution for not establishing a Palestinian state. And, for the past year, you have ministers like Smotrich authorizing more settlements, and you have Ben Gvir who are continuing to provoking the situation in Jerusalem. And there is this argument that the Israeli people are not ready to engage in dialogue with the Palestinians. They are not ready to hear about the two-state solution, and they are still traumatized obviously of October 7th. And my question is, Mickey, what do you think should be done in order to regain the assurance by the Israeli people for their sense of security? What can be done in that regard, at least domestically, in order to move beyond this trauma? Mickey, please.
Thank you. So I will try to refer to your questions and also to some comments that were made before. As a believer in the two-state solution, the two states are supposed to provide a state for the Palestinians and a sense of security for the Israelis. Currently, it is far from obvious that a Palestinian state in the current situation will be able to provide or to ensure security either for Israelis or for the entire region. It could do exactly the opposite. Now, regarding you said the indications that we missed in Gaza, you're absolutely right, Farah. There used to be a military watchtower that Hamas built overlooking the civil population around the Israeli civil population around Gaza, and we were telling ourselves that they are there in order to prevent jihad from attacking Israel. So again, and the ironical thing is that most of the people around the Gaza envelope are peace lovers, left voters that are true believers in peace. So it's very ironic. Now, I do believe there are potential solutions. I think it's an Israeli interest not to have an Israeli presence, neither in Gaza nor in Lebanon, an Israeli interest. But there has to be very, very strict assurance of the security for the population. The United Nations, UNIFIL, the United Nations force proved to be completely irrelevant to that. And if we are talking what is possible, we're talking maybe a multilateral platform, like John mentioned. This is not far-fetched. We have to discuss it. It's a good start for a discussion. But if we talk about who will rule there, who will rule in Gaza after, a perfect way to make the Palestinian National Authority to fail is to give Gaza right now to the Palestinian National Authority. It's a recipe for failure, and this will be bad for the entire region if they fail, because they still state some sort of hope for the Palestinians, some sort of hope for the region. Now, if we talk about rehabilitating Gaza and still keeping Hamas in some form, you know why nobody speaks about the day after in Syria? Because the guy who ruined Syria is still in power. And do you want to duplicate this for Gaza? The people who are responsible for the destruction of Gaza, if they remain in power, Gaza stands no chance of any rehabilitation. I would like to mention also the issue John said, and it's very correct, Israel is losing points in the world public opinion. There are many protests. Now, I would like to say also the protests that took place yesterday around the world. these so-called champions of human rights that are accusing Israel of human rights abuse, I have not heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I've not heard in these demonstrations even once a call to release the women, men, children, and baby that are hostages in Gaza. Never. They are in the tunnels of Hamas, underground. Those who are still alive, some were executed. And I have not heard once these people, in the name of human rights, call for their release. On the contrary, they call Hamas, please repeat your actions. So, John, you are right. We are losing points, but we don't have a choice. The most important human right is the right to live, and we have nowhere else to go, and we're not planning to go anywhere. Regarding Iran, Iran and the entire region, it was suggested that we have to decide. I don't think it's an Israeli decision, and it's not a question of Israeli military might. Iran attacked Israel in the last months twice. Hundreds of rockets were shot at a civilian population. Israel had no pretenses to Iran before. It has no dispute with the Iranian people. And we had rockets coming to at civilian population in Israel, hundreds of rockets and missiles. Now, I'm asked often by friends and colleagues in the Middle East, why doesn't Israel solve the Iranian problem, nuclear problem, once and for all? And my answer is always the same, because this is not only Israel's problem, it's the entire region's problem. And the expectation from us to solve it for the entire world, I mean, if a missile is shot out of Tehran, it will reach Bahrain before it reaches Israel. So everybody's trying to hedge their bets. Saudi Arabia signed in March an agreement with the help of the Chinese, an agreement with Iran, and it's very understandable. If Israel and the West show weakness and doesn't deter Iran, I understand why they wish to hedge their bets. We are the only ones who cannot do it. Now, the saying that Israel is trying, we hear it often, to influence American policy. Now, Israel is fighting today in several fronts because of the West's policy. On October 7th, Israel had many, many failures, which we have to learn and to fix and try to have them never repeated. But on October 7th, Iran and its proxies were richer and stronger than ever before. And this is not because of Israeli policy, it's because of Western policy. European policy, for example, hasn't changed. Israel is being shot by Iranian missiles. Iran is sending missiles to Russia, but Europe did not operate the snapback mechanism that could cancel the cancellation of a missile embargo on Iran. Europe did not do it, and this was because of fear of deterioration. Last point is that it summarizes everything. Nobody wants to make agreements with a weak party. If Israel comes out and the US come out weak from these events, nobody would like to have an agreement, a regional agreement, a multinational platform, only if Israel and the US and the West come out strong. Now, a few months ago, very few months ago, Nasrallah threatened Cyprus, an EU member state, with a military attack because it allegedly helps Israel. The response was, correct me if I'm wrong, the US did not respond, and the EU said, we will stand on the side of Cyprus. This was translated very clearly by Nasrallah, by Hezbollah, that they can start shooting and do whatever they want. I remind you, there was no provocation against Nasrallah, against Hezbollah on October 8th when they started shooting our rockets. So I am not sure it's Israel's decision how the region will be shaped from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. There's no question that nobody wants to make an agreement with a weak party, but it's a question about when to take a benefit and from the momentum and the achievements that it's being achieved and cash it and translate it to something that's actually a benefit for each country. So I'm going to go back to you just to work on this idea, but then I want to ask you, John, about again the issue of multilateralism, and you heard Mickey talking about that it's going to be very hard for any multilateral structure to build Gaza when, for example, Sinwar is still in charge, and we know that the recent estimations of the UN that Gaza needs at least $80 billion to be reconstructed. As a diplomat, like, how do you build a momentum between very diverged, interest and readings of the situation and get people together in order to build a reasonable level of trust, a workable level of understanding that you can actually do something and start to take steps toward changing a little bit of the reality on the ground?
Thanks, Farah. First, actually, I wanted to just clarify something to Mickey, which is maybe I wasn't clear. What I meant by Israel's responsibility, actually, I meant it very specifically towards creating a Palestinian state, not for fixing all the problems in the region. I don't think Israel is in a position to do that. So just for that clarification. And I think that does require time and a deeper political discussion inside Israel, not today, but in the future. To answer your question, though, Farah, the multilateral space that I was talking about was actually aimed at conflict prevention, specifically Iran, Israel, and regional stability writ large. That's number one. I actually think if the Saudis don't get involved with the Americans, there may be no other way to contain and begin to address the core security needs of both Iran and Israel, except through a multilateral format. So that's what I meant. But about something like Gaza or southern Lebanon, yes, multilateralism will be essential. In fact, frankly, especially Gaza, it's going to be inevitable. Once the situation in Gaza looks like it's like truly the war has stopped, and that rebuilding can start in any fashion, it will be automatically multilateral. And I think even many of the hesitations today will be less so once there is an international momentum to do something. I think your point, though, Farah, is a very important one regarding balance and timing and all these things. When is the point when Israelis feel that they've achieved enough militarily in order to, if I can use the word, cash in and translate that into political benefit? That is an incredibly important question for everybody right now. A war ad infinitum to clean up the Middle East in favor of Israel's security is a very, very difficult proposition, in my view. And one last comment, though, about the axis of resistance, about what we may be moving into, that I think is positive, by the way, okay? I think the whole axis of resistance model with Iran and its proxies and allies hasn't quite worked the way that it was anticipated, because what's happened is not what was anticipated. My own view is the axis of resistance was built for long-term attrition, not a sudden acute war like the one we are now experiencing. Therefore, the question, I don't really have the answer, are we possibly moving towards a more state-based order in the Middle East again, i.e. one where proxies and ideological pyromaniacs will start to be contained? It's a question I pose. I do think that if it's a state-based security system rather than the use of proxies, there's a better shot at finding stability.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move on to the audience question. I'm going to start with Jumana Jaouni, our dear friend Jumana, from Zawaya Center for Research and Consultancy from Bethlehem, Jerusalem. I'm going to take, Jumana, your question for Mkhaymar. How did the war change the Gazan perception of the future and the day after, as they call it? Do the majority see Gaza as a separate entity, but part of a greater entity of Palestine? Maybe the question about whether, October 7th transformed the perception of the Gazans as being part of a collective rather than having these two separate entities and two separate geographies. Please.
Thank you, Farah. I want to answer this question, but let me just say something about what has been said by Mickey. It's good, Mickey, to play the role of the victim, that Israel has been a victim of the so-called regional attacks on October 7 and after. But let's also not forget what Israel has done over the past year against the Palestinians. You're talking about 101 Israeli hostages who are held in Gaza, which is a very tragic thing. But let's not also forget about 41,000 Palestinians have been killed over the past year. Half of them are Palestinian children and babies. Let's not forget about the 95,000 Palestinians who have been injured and the displacement over and over and over again, and the starvation that has taken place against 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And let's not forget that it's the International Court of Justice who has been accusing Israel of genocide against more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And supposedly there's supposed to be an arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant, who has committed genocide against the Palestinians. Going back to Jumana's question, and thank you, Jumana, for this question. To the best of my knowledge, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip now are convinced more than ever that there has to be a Palestinian unity, that Gaza has to be part of the Palestinian national project, Gaza and West Bank has to be reunited again, and that there is no future for Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians are very much in Gaza, are dissatisfied with Hamas performance. Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip over the past 17 years has brought poverty, unemployment, cycles of war and escalation with Israel, which has devastated the Palestinians, which has devastated their daily life. And look at what, as I just mentioned, look at what has just happened over the past year. This is another catastrophe. To the best of my, to be more honest with you, this is, even to the Palestinians in Gaza, it's much, much worse than the catastrophe that took place in 1948. It's been happening for a year now. We don't even know when this is going to be, when this is going to end. Displacement after displacement, living in a tent for a year, starvation, pandemic, you name it. I think the Palestinians are saying enough is enough. They want an end to Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip. Now we cannot say that Hamas will have no role to play in the Gaza Strip, because at the end of the day, Hamas is there. We have to deal with it, but they have to agree that the PA, with the support of moderate Arab countries, take control of the Gaza Strip until Palestinian elections can be held again. At the end of the day, the Palestinian people will have to decide who rules them, Hamas, Fatah, PFLP, or whoever, because at the end of the day, this is the Palestinian choice to decide through the ballot box and through elections who rules them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mkhaymar. I'm going to move to Mickey. You have a question from Johnny Joseph from Los Angeles. He's saying that many Jews around the world saw the withdrawal from Gaza in 2005 as a two-state solution experiment. How do we get past October 7th as being seen as a final determination of the failure of this experiment? So the notion of this question, like there is so many failed experiments in the past, years. And Gaza is being given as an example that Israel withdrew from Gaza in order to be like a prototype for how the two-state solution will look like. How do you read that failure, and how do you build on it for the future of Israeli security?
Okay, so I will take on Mechaimer's saying, because I do need to acknowledge that the loss of life in the region is tragic. Yet we have elaborate, repeating promises by Hamas to repeat October 7. Do you know one country in the world that would not try to counter that threat? I don't. Not in the West, not in the East, nowhere. And I believe them when they say they will try to repeat it. I believe they would. I'm not going to even discuss the fact that we build shelters, Hamas builds tunnels. He can put his civil population there, but no, it serves the purpose of this organization, this terror organization, to have civilians killed, because it gives terrible, terrible footage around the world. You want to sell? Release our hostages, put down your weapons. The war will end on the same day, I believe. Regarding the lesson from 2005 and the failed experiment, we paid a very, very high price. I think not only the Israelis, the Palestinians paid a very high price for this failed experience. And the first and foremost for us would be securing our interest would be making sure our civil population can go back to their homes. There are dozens of thousands of people that are evacuated in the north and the south, and they can live securely. We will not accept again quiet for quiet. Hezbollah just declared, Naim Qassem just said, they are willing to have an unconditional ceasefire and then discuss the conditions for long-term arrangement. This is not good enough anymore, because we used to have, throughout the years, we used to have missiles being shot at us. We called it something like drizzle, if I may use the British expression. This was not drizzle. These were missiles falling over our heads. And this will not be repeated anymore, because the main failure is our misperception of the intentions of Hamas. And I believe and I hope that Israel from now on relate to capabilities and not only to what we assume, our failure in interpreting intentions.
Thank you, Mickey. I have a question for John Bell from Suhaib Bani Hamad from Jordan. Suhaib is saying that Israel withdrawal from South Lebanon and Gaza contributed to a power vacuum that allowed religiously motivated militias and proxy powers like Hezbollah to rise, reinforcing a narrative of a Jewish state under existential religious threat. This dynamic has undermined the two-state solution and deepened reliance on religious justification for the ongoing violence. And the question that he has, how can a path forward be created that moves away from these fear-based dynamics? And you alluded to that in your presentation. Please, John.
Yes, it's a good question. It's true what the individual said. I think there's a truth to it. But it doesn't mean that the military reverse, which is a reoccupation by Israel, is the answer. So therefore, the question to me is, can the answers be found diplomatically rather than through strictly military means? My own view is yes, with a lot of work on all the fronts, all of them. The war, I might not have said this, by the way, 1 year ago. This war, tragic as it is and horrible as it is, and it's ongoing, it's not over, has, I think, woken up many people in the region to the possible, edge of the cliff. That's a harsh reality. Maybe we can use that reality to address these core needs of all sides: Israeli security, Palestinian need for a state, Iranian security. Okay? Nobody's going to get everything that they want at all. They're not going to. Nobody is. And nobody's going to get perfect assurances. There are no such things. And nobody's going to get a perfect state. But can we step back and address these core issues, not band-aids, core issues diplomatically? I think so. In a multilateral forum, I think it's absolutely possible, including the answers to the question this individual posed. Those are even the easier ones, slightly easier, Southern Lebanon, Gaza, rather than the big strategic ones between Iran and Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And not to mention Jerusalem, by the way. Khaymer, there is a question from Hannah Lieberman from Iran program researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. She's asking, do Gazans see a two-state solution as a stepping stone toward destroying Israel? How can we ensure that the two-state solution is not seen as a rewarding crimes of October 7th, which is mostly the narrative that is that we hear mostly lately? Please, Khaymer.
Thank you, Farah, and thanks for Mrs. Lieberman for this very good question. The answer to her question is no. The answer is the Palestinian people have been believing in peace for many years. Let me just give her just a short overview what has happened back 30 years ago, when the Oslo peace agreement signed between the State of Israel and the PLO in September of 1993, and the Palestinian Authority was established on July of 1994. A number of public opinion polls were conducted in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and also among the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Back then, 80% of the Palestinians supported the peace process. 80% of the Palestinians did not believe in armed resistance at that time. They were hopeful that the Oslo peace process will put an end to the Israeli occupation, will put an end to the Israeli settlement enterprise in the Palestinian occupied territories, and will lead to the two-state solution. But unfortunately, Rabin was killed by an Israeli radical in November of 1995. And then Netanyahu came to power. And we all know that Netanyahu never believed in Oslo, never believed in peace with the Palestinians. He has said that repeatedly, and he has said that many times, that he will work against the two-state solution. So it was Netanyahu's policies in the late 1990s, and then after he came to power in 2009 until now, these policies that created disbelief among the Palestinians that this is not working. Settlement expansion, land confiscation, home demolitions, mass arrest against the Palestinians, besieging Gaza and making Gaza the largest open-air prison on the face of earth for more than 2 million people. That is what pushed the Palestinians to support armed struggle and armed resistance against Israel. But the fact of the matter is that the Palestinians still believe in the two-state solution. They believe to live in peace and security alongside the State of Israel. But that has to put an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land that has been occupied since 1967, and also put an end to the Israeli settlement enterprise, which has led to the growth of Israeli settlers in the West Bank. From 1993, the number were 220,000 Israelis. Now we're talking about roughly 700,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The Palestinian people are no longer able to accept that. If a Palestinian state has to be created, that has to be created on the basis of the Arab Peace Initiative, which was accepted by 22 Arab countries, and it has also to be created alongside the international community, especially United Nations Security Council resolutions 242 and 338, meaning that there has to be an end to the Israeli occupation, there has to be an end to Israeli settlement in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and there has to be an Israeli acknowledgement of the suffering that they have caused to the Palestinian people over the past 76 years.
Thank you, Khaymer. There is a very important question from Mohammed Jismaisani, who's asking about basically the notion of this question. What are the dangers of going back to the management paradigm when we are when it's very difficult to go to pre-October 7th? And this is the question for all of you. Maybe I'll start with John. What are the dangers of going back to management paradigm when we can't go? Like, things shifted so much after October 7th that we can't go to pre-October 7th.
The dangers of going back to a conflict management scenario are massive. They're a disaster for the region. Number one, because October 7th happened because the core issues for all the parties weren't attended to. So if we can't learn that lesson after 1 year of war, then I'm afraid it will be war ad infinitum. The other factor that I think people aren't fully focusing on is it's not just about the Middle East. The global powers, the major powers, are themselves in an inflamed situation with each other. That's not very helpful for the Middle East. We could think of a dream scenario where they work together to help the Middle East. That's not likely these days, to say the least. In fact, the opposite is, which is the Middle East can weave into the very dangerous global dynamics. That's a big concern. And therefore, conflict management, as in a way easy as it is diplomatically and politically, because it's low cost, is the worst possible scenario for the region. If the region doesn't wake up, or all the key political actors in the region don't wake up now and come to the table to deal with their hardcore interests, not conflict management, ...
Thank you, John. There is a question from Firas Ashayer from the UAE. I think it's more of a cynical question. Wouldn't a Palestinian state be a failure state like Lebanon? Why do we need another failure state in the region? Maybe I'll go to Khaymer for that.
Well, let me say that, first of all, the Palestinians deserve self-determination. There is no point of keeping the Palestinians, more than 5.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip under Israeli occupation and Israeli domination. The Palestinians deserve to decide what is best for them, whether it's a Palestinian independent state or whatever the Palestinians decide. But to say that a Palestinian state will be another failed state like many other states in the region, I guess, let me just remind your viewers that the Palestinian people, not to brag about it, but one of the best educated people in the Middle East region are the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people have a lot of potential that if they are given the opportunity to have an independent sovereign state, they will be able to flourish. They have succeeded in almost every possible way that they have been given responsibility over the past many years. And just to say that another Palestinian state in the region will be another failed state, I think that is totally wrong. But at the end of the day, that Palestinian state will have to come through a peace negotiation with Israel. It also will have to be supported by the Arab moderate countries, by the international community, that a state not to be isolated and not to be like a pariah state. And I think a Palestinian state will flourish and will be a peace-loving state like many other countries around the world.
Thank you, Khaymer. I assume that the genesis of this, question about exploring other arrangements and alternatives for the two-state solution, I assume he's referring to one-state solution in that regard. But anyway, I think I want to be mindful of time. It's 9:25, and we only have 5 minutes before we are concluding this webinar. And I want to give the chance for each speaker to give your closing remarks, but maybe focus on what can be done today in order to influence the trajectory of where the region is heading, because obviously from your reading, we are definitely not heading in the right direction. Let me start with you, Mickey.
So 2005, Israel left Gaza. We uprooted, with the tremendous political cost, by the way, economic cost and security cost, we uprooted settlers from Gaza. There wasn't a single Israeli left in Gaza in 2005. In 2006, Hamas was elected. And what went from there, what happened after that between Hamas and Fatah, and the violence is really has nothing to do with Israel. So I think people in the region, also the Palestinians, have to decide which model they wish to live according to. And I think there's a reason for the fact that despite there will always be terrorist attacks, but there is no popular uprising in the West Bank, because people in the West Bank they see what's happening around, and really they don't want to imitate neither Syria nor Lebanon nor Gaza. Now, I think for Israel has to, again, I see no better solution than the two-state solution for the long run. I want to have a border with the Palestinians in order to be able to lead a normal relationship with them. But to speak about it right now seems a bit not realistic for the short run. We need to do whatever it takes to return our hostages, those who are alive, or the bodies, and we need to provide proper security for our population by achieving military goals. I would like to end by this thought to the terrorists that surprised us badly, that made us bleed heavily on October 7th. We were caught off guard, partially because of our own hubris and belief in our might. And we paid the highest price I think the Jewish people paid since World War II and the Holocaust. What I don't understand, and this should be a thought that should follow us into the future, what was the purpose? What did they think about achieving? Was it worth it a year after, where you see where Israel is and where the terror organizations, either in Lebanon or in Gaza and wherever they are? That's it. I leave you with this thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. I'm going to move to Khaymer.
Thank you, Farah. I think what has to be reiterated here is that there is a need for a ceasefire now. The Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip have been going through catastrophe after catastrophe. The situation is so dire at all levels. And the continuation of this Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is just causing tremendous suffering for more than 2 million people in Gaza. And that's why we need a ceasefire immediately. And let me also reiterate one thing, that there will be no peace and no security and no stability in this region without solving the Palestinian issue. The Palestinians have been suffering for the past 76 years. It's about time that the Palestinians are given the right to self-determination and decide what is best for them. And let me just say one thing. After this tragic and this catastrophic year that has led to a lot of bloodshed, a lot of killing among the Palestinians in Gaza, that we, the Palestinians, will not rest until we see Netanyahu and Gallant in the presence of the International Criminal Court. What they have done against the Palestinian people is war crimes, and Netanyahu and Gallant must be punished for those crimes that have been committed against the Palestinian civilian population, children, women, and babies, and they suffering, starvation, all of that has been happening. Someone must be held accountable for that, and it's Netanyahu and Israeli commanders who have committed these war crimes against the Palestinians must be held accountable for those. Thank you.
John, you will have the last words.
Thank you, Farah. Yesterday I read an article titled, "Is This Lebanon's Last War?" 1 hour later, I received an interview that was titled, "Is This Israel's Last War?" In a way that could be understood negatively, meaning, apocalyptic destruction, but actually it can be understood the other way, and I think both meant it that way, which is that these wars maybe will wake people enough or awaken people enough in order to find other means. I do think that we're at a point, maybe not for long, where the balance of power that is being developed will actually permit diplomatic answers. If it tips too far in any direction, that won't happen anymore. I don't know if we have the leadership, the political leadership, obviously, to make that judgment. It's a very, very fine judgment. When wars go on for too long or they overstretch, they'll go on forever. However, I don't think the balance of power today and for the next few months equals eternal war. So fingers crossed.
I'm gonna join my prayers to yours. Maybe, hopefully, we're gonna have a regional awakening. And with that, I'm gonna let me thank all of you, our esteemed speakers, our amazing audience. And I'm really sorry that I did not go through all these questions. And before turning the mic for Steve, I just want to thank an army of 3 amazing ladies, Salome, Emily, and Laura Lee. Like, you work behind the scenes, and none of this would happen without all of you. So thank you so much, and thank you for this engagement and insightful remarks. Thank you so much. To you, Steve.
Thank you. I have to say that in my position, I could have left at any time. I couldn't leave for a minute because I think this was such an important presentation, and I am, bad news for the speakers perhaps, going to ask if they might be interested in writing something up, because although none of us may have agreed with every word, each presentation was as good as you can get. And I am just so excited that if I was able to put together this kind of a program, select these particular individuals. And I do think this is very important. It's very important for the world to see, and it's very important for people to see how very serious individuals on different steps, different perspectives, how they see it. I think it was just a fabulous presentation. And I also think that many of our presentations should be presented not only verbally, but this one was particularly significant, and I want to make it the first. At any rate, I'm also asked to tell you that this webinar was CMED's first of the academic year, and we hope to have many more than last year. We have an engaging schedule of programs coming this fall. Please join us on October 23rd to discuss future U.S. and Iranian policies, implications for the Middle East and North Africa. And there's a new description of this that you can see getting more in line with some of what you've just heard. Update on Iran and Israel. So there will, this will be the Iran and Israel case. And we have 3 very important speakers to deal with this, well-known and so important. And then we will have on November 12th, the new president and the impact on the MENA region. It's so close, I'm beginning to get nervous that we won't know that on November 10th. We'll see. And both of these are up in front of you. Both of them, I think, will be very important. and there are several others being discussed. So if you have not already joined our mailing list, please send us a message at cmed@international.ucla.edu. There's a scan me that might help you on both sides. We hope to see you soon. And I hate to say it after this very, very important discussion, and that is bye for now. Bye-bye, everyone.